But do you think you'll be able to coalesce together? Because we've seen, you know, all sorts of different movements. There's the NIM, there's a coalition suggested by President Obasanjo, which kicked off a couple of days after he wrote his letter. There's also the Red Card movement, which haven't quite suggested alternatives. They're all different movements from what we can see. And you're wondering, how can these movements coalesce? Can they really present a third force?
So the Red Card movement is kind of distinct from all other movements, because the other movements are clearly political movements. So they are going to probably metamorphose into a political grouping or some form of that. The Red Card movement is basically citizens now saying, we don't care about your platform. There are two platforms that we particularly care about to make sure that their hegemony, their very unacceptable hegemony over our political landscape is dismantled in order to open up the political space for the entry of minds that can begin to conceive of the governance of the country differently from what we've had in the now almost 20 years of our democracy since 1999. And so the citizens are saying that we want to be able to say to political parties, there are certain credentials that we want to see in anyone who is going to end up on your party ticket for us to vote for them. You cannot compromise on character. You cannot compromise on competence. You cannot compromise on capacity.
So is a problem, if I might come in here, is a problem then the platforms or the people who this platform? Because some people will argue that, you know, for all that the platforms have been, some of them have provided some of the finest people, you know, that have governed this country. I mean, talk about even the platform that carried former President Olusegun Obasanjo, under which you served in his government. They provided some of these people and brought them to limelight. Can we really criticize? Is it the platform or the people on the platforms?
That's why I use the word dominant. So, you know, if you looked at the statistical significance of the appearance of some measure of good governance in the way that we've been governed, whether it's under PDP or under APC, you would find that we have a consistency of behavior and pattern of conduct that does not lend itself to good governance. And so we are stuck with an elite, I take that back, with a political class that makes choices that often tend to negate the common good. And so you would find that the politicians that we have in our country have become, it's like a pool of people. There's a migratory tendency amongst them. Some of the people that have been in our politics have been in all parties.
But freedom of association
totally agree.
Is guaranteed.
I totally
There is
agree.
no guarantee that if you start this new third force movement and it does gain ground, you will not see some politicians,
But the third force movement is going to go through, the third force movement is also going to go through this whole thing about the screening. Nobody gets a pass. The only thing that we're saying, the reason that we're very outright about APC and PDP is to send a very strong signal that these parties have failed in being able to putting up the best of citizens. And we're not talking presidency. That's part of what people don't seem to get yet. We're talking about political leadership of our country, local government level, members of the legislature at all levels, House of Assembly and then House of Reps, Senate, and then of course the executive at the federal being the presidency. We're saying that in all of this, we need to be mindful about the quality of our political actors.
But your criticism...
Right now, we're not. And our criticism is that APC and PDP have dominated the political space and given this consistent pattern of providing almost the worst of situations for people. If you looked at the 2015 election, what was it that happened? People were faced with options. that some said, I'd rather stay away from voting than voting for any of the two. Or people who voted said, I'm holding my nose and just taking the lesser of the two evils. You had things like that. Why should we face that kind of a situation in our politics? We can't afford it. Some countries that are already built up may afford those kinds of luxuries, but we can't. We want to have quality political system that bubbles up the best to our political platforms. So what we do by waving the red card to the two dominant parties is to send a strong signal.
But what is the guarantee that it will not disappoint? I mean,
who would not disappoint?
I mean, this third force, for a lot of Nigerians, they have been there, done that. I mean, in terms of coming out to vote, having their hopes being raised, oh, this government is going to be better than the last one, and at the end of the day, it's same of the same.
Well, you know, usually when you think of a risk taken, if you're doing a prisoner, if you're in a prisoner's dilemma situation and you're looking at your options, or you're in a decision tree kind of situation, and you're looking at, should I do this or not do that? You always have to say to yourself that a no action is worse than, you know, taking an action that has a probability of succeeding. So, for example, to simply say, this is our lot, we're stuck with APC and PDP, that is not acceptable as a way of even conceptualizing nation building. And so it's important that we should imagine that if citizens took a very strong presence in our political conversation, they could actually shift these political parties. For example, what I'd expect someone in APC or PDP to begin to say is, oh well, citizens have awakened to an important role that they must play at the upstream level of our politics.
But wasn't that clear in 2015? I mean, for a lot of citizens, they believe that one of the victories of 2015 was that everybody won. I mean, the PDP won because the president left office a statesman, the APC was able to get office, and the citizens were able to show their power, that they indeed have the power to elect whomever it was that they felt should be at the helm of affairs.
But Maupe, doesn't stop at the level of politics. When people win an election, then governance starts, right? And governance is the real deal. Now, governance is the real deal because it is through governance that a party is then able to frame a vision and to work the vision and produce results. The essential and the core responsibility of government is to be able to improve the quality of life of citizens, no matter what level of development a country has. That's the core role of government. Now, when that does not happen, when each cycle of election produces an outcome that ends up in governance, not producing results, you need to go upstream. And so that's what citizens are doing through the Red Card movement. They basically say, we want to go upstream and engage in this conversation because we want to begin to see better quality of the people who get elected.